Most people who come to this teaching arrive with the same hidden error already installed inside them. They do not know they have it. It feels like effort. It feels like discipline. It even feels like devotion. They sit quietly. They close their eyes. They construct a picture of what they want. They try to feel the emotion of having it. They hold the image for minutes at a time. They do this consistently, faithfully, sometimes for months. And nothing moves, or things move slowly, partially, in fragments that never quite assemble into the life they were reaching for. And then they conclude that they are doing something wrong. They search for a better technique, a clearer scene, a more precise feeling. They read more, they practice harder, they chase the method when the method was never the problem. I am Abdullah. These principles are ancient. They were ancient before I taught them, and they will outlast every voice that has ever carried them, including my own. Among those who sat with me and received this teaching was a student named Neville. But what I am about to share with you today belongs to no single teacher and no single tradition. It belongs to the law itself. And the law does not care who explains it. It only cares whether you apply it. There is a distinction, a single precise distinction that changes everything about how this law actually works. And most people, even those who have studied these teachings for years, are standing just outside the door of it. They are visualizing the future, and the future cannot be reached by looking at it. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you is not a refinement of what you already know. It is a correction of the most fundamental error in how nearly everyone applies this law. And once you see it, you will never practice the same way again. Here is the error stated plainly. When you visualize the future, you are positioning yourself in the present, looking forward towards something you do not yet have. The very act of projecting forward in time announces to the deepest part of your mind that the desired thing is not here. It is there, out ahead of you, waiting to be reached. And a mind that registers something as not yet here will produce a life in which that thing is not yet here, with perfect consistency, with perfect fidelity. Because the subconscious mind does not give you what you want. It gives you what you are. This is the teaching that most people miss. And it is the teaching that must be corrected before the law begins working the way these teachings describe. The correction is this: you do not visualize the future. You occupy it. These are not the same action. They are not variations of the same action. They are opposites. Visualization is observation from a distance. You are here, looking at something over there. The viewer and the viewed are separate. The observer and the desired reality remain in two different locations, one in the present, one in the imagined future, and the law, which only reflects the state you actually inhabit, reflects the gap between them. Occupation is something else entirely. It is the act of entering the imagined state so completely that you are no longer looking at it. You are living from inside it. You are not the person hoping to arrive. You are the person who is already there, looking back at the world from the vantage point of the fulfilled desire. This is not a metaphor. It is a precise, psychological instruction about where your consciousness must be positioned at the moment of creation. This distinction was stated plainly in these teachings. There is a vast difference between thinking of an image and thinking from it. Thinking of it is a confession you are not in it. Thinking from it is proof that you are. And only thinking from it gives the image substance. Only thinking from it causes the outer world to conform. You must be where you are in imagination, not where you wish you were, where you are. Now let me show you precisely what this means in practice, because a principle without instruction is incomplete. The imaginal act that works, the one that causes time to collapse between the inner reality and the outer one, has a specific quality that most people's practice is missing. It is not vivid enough to be experienced as a movie. It is vivid enough to be mistaken for memory. When you truly occupy a state, you are not watching a pleasant scene unfold. You are inside it so completely that your nervous system accepts it as a present fact. The imaginal hands feel solid. The imaginal voice you hear carries the texture of a real voice. The sense of place, of being located in a specific somewhere, is indistinguishable from physical presence. This is not achieved by forcing intensity. It is achieved by entering the state at the right level of mind, the threshold between waking and sleep, where the analytical surface mind grows quiet and the deeper creative dimension opens. At that threshold, imagination does not register as imagination. It registers as experience, and experience is what the subconscious mind acts upon. Here is what this looks like when a person truly understands it. A woman had exhausted every external effort to attend a particular performance she deeply desired to see. She had called agencies, called friends with influence, pursued every avenue available to her. No ticket was to be had anywhere. Every door was closed. Then she stopped trying to get the ticket and did something different. She simply assumed she was already in the audience. She placed herself inside the experience of watching the performance and enjoying it thoroughly. She was not looking at a future event. She was inhabiting the present reality of being there. A few days passed. Then a friend who lived 3,000 miles away called to say he would be in her city and asked if she was free one evening. They met for dinner. Afterward, he took her to see the very performance she had assumed she was already attending. A man 3,000 miles away was moved by an impulse he could not explain to travel across the country and deliver precisely what her inner assumption required. He was not consciously aware of her desire. He had no logical reason to act as the instrument of her fulfillment. The inner act had already occurred. The outer world simply organized itself around it. This is what occupying a state produces. Not effort, not pursuit. An automatic rearrangement of circumstances, moved by forces the conscious mind cannot track, to deliver the exact equivalent of what was inhabited. But here is what separates those who succeed from those who try once and walk away. And I want you to stay with me now, because this next part is where most people fail. Before I reveal the specific method of occupation, the exact sequence of interactions that impresses the subconscious mind with an inhabited state rather than an observed one, I want you to do one thing right now. Comment the word reset below this video. When you do, you will receive the Manifest Reset, a free guide built on exactly this teaching. It contains 5 specific resets for the moments when the practice breaks down, when you cannot feel the state, when doubt floods in, when the outer world contradicts what you know to be true on the inside. Each reset is short, practical, and immediately usable. Not theory, not inspiration. Actual tools for returning to the inhabited state when your mind has drifted back to observation. Comment reset now, get the guide, and let me continue. Now, the method. The first thing you must understand is what scene to occupy. Most people construct the wrong moment. They imagine receiving what they want, the call coming in, the check arriving, the door opening. And this is the subtle error that keeps the practice at the level of observation rather than occupation. When you imagine the moment of receiving, your consciousness is still positioned outside the fulfilled state, watching it arrive. There is an element of suspense still present, an element of reaching. The desire has not yet landed all the way into assumption. Instead, you must construct a moment that exists after the fulfillment, a moment that can only occur because the thing you want is already done. A simple, natural human moment, a conversation, a quiet evening, a brief exchange with a friend, that implies without any drama that your desire is already an established fact of your life. Not the moment it happened, a moment inside the life where it has already happened. If you desire a new position, do not imagine being told you have it. Imagine a brief exchange with a friend, days later, in which you mention something ordinary about your new responsibilities. The ease of that exchange, the naturalness of it, the feeling of someone who has crossed a threshold so completely that the crossing itself is already forgotten. That is the feeling you are after, not excitement, not relief, familiarity. The quiet sense that this is simply how things are now. The second instruction is about location. You must be inside the scene, not watching it from a step back, not observing yourself having the experience. You must be the one in the scene, looking outward from within it, experiencing it from behind your own eyes. This distinction is not subtle. It is the difference between a daydream and a creative act. In the daydream, you watch yourself. In the inhabited state, you are simply present. There is no watcher. There is only the experience. The third instruction is about timing. Enter the scene at the threshold between waking and sleep. Lie down. Allow the body to become still. Let wakefulness begin to soften. Not sleep, but the threshold, the drowsy state where the senses withdraw from the outer world and the creative dimension becomes accessible. At this level, what you inhabit is not registered as imagination. It is accepted as fact. And at that threshold, loop the scene, not with force, with ease. Return to it again and again, as naturally as you would return your attention to a piece of music you enjoy. Each repetition deepens the impression. Each pass through the scene makes it more familiar, more inhabited, more real to the deeper mind that will act upon it. You will know the work is done when the desire shifts, when the burning wanting transforms into a quiet knowing. When you can think of your desire with the same neutral ease with which you think of something you already possess, at that point you leave it alone. You do not dig it up. You do not check the outer world for signs of progress. You live your life from inside the new state and allow the bridge of events to assemble itself in whatever form it takes. Because the how is not your work. Your only work was the occupation. Everything that follows is the outer world catching up with the inner fact you have already established. Now I want to address the question that arrives for nearly everyone at this point, because it is the question that determines whether what I have taught you will actually transform your life or remain a pleasant idea. What happens when the outer world does not immediately confirm the inner state? What happens when you have occupied the fulfilled reality in imagination and you wake the next morning to find everything exactly as it was? What happens when days pass, and then weeks, and the old circumstances persist? This is the test, and it is the precise point where most people abandon the practice, often within days of it having already begun working. Here is what is actually happening in those moments. The outer world is not contradicting your assumption, it is reflecting an older one. The images you see around you, the circumstances that seem to deny your desired reality, are not present tense creations. They are delayed expressions of states you previously inhabited, now arriving in physical form after the time interval required for inner impressions to harden into outer fact. They are shadows, not of your new state, of your old one. And shadows have no creative power. They cannot sustain themselves independently of the consciousness that cast them. When you hold the new state consistently, the old reflections fade, not because you fought them, not because you argued with them, because you stopped feeding them with your attention, your belief, and the creative power of your dwelling. This is the revision that one of Neville's documented students demonstrated in one of the most quietly remarkable stories I know. This student had been walking his dog one morning when a man stopped him on the street and asked for money to eat. He refused, held back by a long-standing pledge he had made years before after being deceived by a street beggar. The man accepted the refusal graciously and walked on. But the refusal troubled the student deeply, and as he stood there on the street, he did something most people would never think to do. He revised the scene on the spot. He stopped. He closed his eyes for only a few moments, and in imagination he replayed the encounter differently. The same man approached him. They talked briefly about his dog, and then the man said honestly that he had a job starting the very next morning, but was hungry that evening. And in imagination the student reached into his pocket and gave the man money gladly. He felt the full satisfaction of the act. The guilt dissolved immediately. He knew the imaginal act was fact. He knew from the inside that the man had a job beginning the next morning, and he walked on. 4 months later, on the same street, the same man appeared again. He said, "Young man, I don't suppose you remember me, but a while back I asked you for money, and you very kindly said no. I say kindly, because if you had given it to me, I would still be asking for money. Instead, I got a job that very next morning, and now I am on my feet and have some self-respect again." The imaginal act performed in seconds on a public street, held in consciousness, without any outer confirmation for 4 months, expressed itself exactly as it had been inhabited, not approximately, not in some general direction. Exactly, this is what it means when we say imagining creates reality, not that it influences reality, not that it tends to produce outcomes in the general vicinity of what was imagined. It creates the precise equivalent of the inhabited state, through whatever instruments and avenues are required on whatever timeline the expression demands. Your only responsibility is to remain faithful to the occupied state, regardless of what the outer world reflects, while the expression is still in progress. Let me now tell you the single most important thing I can leave you with, because it governs everything else. The reason this law is not working the way you believe it should is almost never a problem with your scene. It is almost never a problem with your technique. It is almost never a problem with your desire. It is a problem with location. You are standing outside the state, visualizing toward it, when you need to be standing inside it, living from it. The moment you make that shift, truly, not as an exercise but as a way of inhabiting your own mind, you will discover what students of this law have confirmed across decades of documented experience. The outer world does not take a long time to change. It takes exactly as long as it takes for the inner state to become genuinely inhabited. Once the occupation is complete, what the world calls time collapses. Events that seemed impossible begin assembling themselves through perfectly natural channels. People, circumstances, and opportunities move toward you not because you chased them, but because your inhabited state made their arrival inevitable. This is not magic. It is the law of consciousness operating with the same impartiality it always has. The only variable is whether you are working with it or against it, whether you are occupying the state or merely observing it from a distance. Now you know the difference, and knowing the difference you have no excuse left for remaining outside. Before you go, I want to make sure you have what you need for the moments this practice becomes difficult. Because it will become difficult. There will be mornings when you wake and the old circumstances are still present. There will be moments when the mind drifts back to observation, back to wanting, back to measuring the gap between where you are and where you want to be. There will be days when the occupied state feels far away and the outer evidence feels overwhelming. For those moments you need something immediately usable. Not another lecture, not another principle. A specific reset you can apply in the moment. That is what the Manifest Reset was built to give you. It contains 5 resets drawn directly from this teaching. One for when you cannot feel the state and everything seems forced and hollow. One for when doubt arrives and the mind argues that nothing is changing. One for when you have fallen out of the occupied state and cannot find your way back. One for when delay has stretched long enough that your faith is beginning to crack. And one for returning to your axis, to the quiet, settled knowing that is the frequency of fulfillment, when the outer world has pulled you back into reaction. These resets are short. They are practical. You can use them tonight. Comment the word reset in the comments below right now. It is free. Comment reset. Do it now. There is one more teaching I need to direct you to. Everything I have shown you today. The distinction between visualization and occupation. The quality of the inhabited state. The way the outer world reorganizes itself around the inner fact. This is the operational mechanics of the law. But beneath the mechanics there is something more fundamental. Something that determines whether your practice produces lasting transformation or only temporary results. It is the foundation on which every technique either stands or collapses. Most students of this teaching never fully encounter it, not because it is hidden, because it is so close to the center of everything that the mind searching for complexity passes right over it. It concerns the 2 words you say more than any others. The 2 words that are either the most creative force in your existence or the most destructive weapon you wield against yourself daily, and most people have no idea which one they are doing. I am. That teaching is called Abdullah's lost teaching on I am, the ancient weapon you're using as a curse. It is appearing on your screen right now. Watch it next. Because what you receive today about occupation and time will become twice as powerful once you understand what that teaching reveals. The video is on your screen. Watch it immediately.